This week you are going to focus on character. So the first thing I'd like you to do is look at this image of a pre-existing historical character, Tommy Shelby, and write a short description of the character. If you know the character already, then you can use this knowledge to help you. If you do not know who Tommy Shelby is, be inspired by the image. Think about his costume, facial expression, props, and any details that are used to reflect the era. There's a challenge here to consider what descriptive techniques you could use in this short description to make your writing more interesting. So give yourself 5 minutes to write a short description of this character. We're going to use this description this week as we build upon our creative writing skills. As we consider how to create a believable character with real thoughts and feelings, relationships with others, and what their motivations might be, this is the section of the marking tag that you will focus on. Creating lifelike characters whom our readers can picture clearly in their mind using dialogue, relationships, and actions that make sense for the characters you've created. You are going to have the additional task, because this is historical fiction, of ensuring that your character is true to the time they are set in. Here are 2 words that I introduced you to last week when considering character. The first is tension, and the idea that the only way you can build tension for your reader is to create characters they care enough about so that they worry for them. And the second is motivation, always thinking about what will keep them moving forward. This week, as I said in the previous slide, we are going to think about relationships, dialogue, and actions and reactions. And the techniques that I'm going to get you working with are show not tell, limited dialogue, and varied sentence openers. Show not tell is one of my favourite techniques to teach. It's really simple but can be very effective if done well. Here are 4 examples of some dull sentences that rely on adjectives. Beneath them are the 4 sentences reworked so that the emotions are conveyed through verbs and adverbs instead of adjectives. On each of the following slides is a GIF and an accompanying sentence. The sentence will use an adjective. I want you to rework it so that your sentence includes verbs and adverbs in order to convey your character's emotions. You can use the GIF for inspiration, or you can use your own imagination and your own knowledge of that emotion and what it would look like in a character. Here is your final GIF and sentence for the show not tell task. Keep your notes handy because they could come in useful when crafting your own character description. The second technique I'm going to introduce you to this week is varied sentence openers. If you were with me in S2 last year, then this should be fairly familiar to you. Sentences can become really dull if the structures are repetitive. So there's an example here of how we can mix up the lengths of our sentences. I want to remind you of that, but we're not going to go over it in much depth. The thing that I want us to really drill down into this week is how to mix up our openers. So if every opener begins with a noun phrase, it can get very dull. The girl, the dog, the shop. What we can do to counter that is be intentional about how we begin our sentences and try to open some of our sentences with verbs, adverbs, adjectives, and prepositions. Here is an example of a piece of writing, a character description, in which every sentence opens the same way, with a noun phrase. Read through it and just think about the impact that repetitive structure has on this piece of writing. In the next slide, I'm going to show you how we can spice things up a little bit. This is how you might begin to redraft in order to vary your sentence openers. Have a look through what you've already written for the different types of word classes in each sentence. It's really good to get our heads around the different word classes before we try to apply this to our own work. So if you are unsure, if you feel a bit shaky on your knowledge of word classes, have a look through this slide and how I've colour coded it. And then you might want to spend some time this week just revising your own knowledge of verbs, adverbs, adjectives, and prepositions. On this slide, you can see the original paragraph, where each sentence begins with a noun phrase, and a redrafted paragraph. It's the same character, the same plot, but I've tried to be conscious about the way I open my sentences. There are some tasks at the bottom of this slide to help you to get your head around varying your sentence openers. The first question says, can you think of different ways to use this technique for this extract? So you could have a go at reworking this extract. And then it says there, spend 5 to 10 minutes only reworking the original so that each sentence starts with a different word class, and yours can be different to my redraft, which is here as an example. The challenge here is to go back to your original description of Tommy Shelby and redraft it, making sure that each sentence begins in a different way and trying to avoid boring noun phrases where possible. This is where we start to layer up the knowledge that you've acquired this week. So now that you've redrafted your original Tommy Shelby description using a variety of sentence openers, I'd like you to go back and redraft again, this time trying to add show not tell descriptions to your original character description of Tommy Shelby. This will be really helpful because it gives you a chance to play around with a character that you're not that invested in. That means you can be a bit ruthless when it comes to your descriptions and what you want to scrap and what you want to replace. You'll keep this handy so that you can craft your own character description this week using show not tell and a variety of sentence openers. Before you get started on the main task this week, which is to develop your own character description, I want to take a moment to remind you of some key messages around dialogue. Here are 3 bullet points that I tend to stick to in terms of guidance for writing effective dialogue. It must move the story forward. After each conversation or exchange, the reader should feel one step closer to either the climax or the conclusion of your story. If there is too much dialogue, it can sometimes slow down the momentum and become a bit ploddy, so avoid writing in too much dialogue for your characters. The second point there says it should reveal relevant information about the character. So thinking about how everything you write must have purpose, must be linked to your character's motivation, and must push the character along the journey of the story mountain planner. We don't need to know every minute detail about your character, only that which is relevant to the journey you've set them on. And finally, it must help the reader to understand the relationship between the characters. And note there that if your dialogue doesn't accomplish all of those 3 points, it's a waste of words. So be sparing, be clever and conscious about the dialogue that you do include. I've included a link just here for a more detailed guide to writing better dialogue. Please have a go at reading, engaging with that before you write your character description this week. A final note that is relevant to historical fiction is remembering that the dialogue must also reflect the era in which you're writing, that your characters should speak in a way that reflects the time, but also is straightforward and understandable for your reader. As mentioned earlier, your main task for this week is to write a 1-paragraph description of the actions or emotions of your main character. You should have an idea by now of who your main character is because you wrote your story mountain plan last week. You're still getting to grips with this character. It's perfectly fine for you to have one idea this week and perhaps to return to it next week and want to scrap it or change it. But wherever you're at just now, please write 1 paragraph to introduce me to your main character. You'll need your story mountain planner in front of you, and I would like your 1 paragraph to reflect what you've understood this week of the 3 techniques: show, not tell, a variety of sentence openers, and smart, effective dialogue.